Hello and welcome to the Boston Herald video podcast. My name is Harold Lapidus. Ready for your intro? The poet laureate of rock and roll journalism, the voice of the promise and disappointment of the 60s counterculture, the guy who forced country into bed with punk, who donned slewfoot in the 70s and disappeared in a haze of substance abuse, who emerged to edit National Lampoon, who suddenly shifted gears and released some of his strongest writing career beginning in the late 1990s. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome MCA recording artist, Michael Simmons.
You stole that, Harold.
Well, so did he.
Well, you know, they say when you steal from the best.
That's right. I've known Michael for many years, almost a decade at this point. Michael, among other things, writes for Mojo. Here's a Mojo compilation of Dylan stuff that came out recently that includes some of his articles, including an expanded version of this Time Out of Mind piece. There's also a volume 1 where he talks about self-portrait and other things. He's written for the Huffington Post, LA Weekly, and other publications. And when I first moved to Boston in September 1977, and the drinking age was still 18, I got to go to clubs like Paul's Mall in Boston, which is across from the Prudential Building. And the first live entertainment I saw was the National Lampoon Review. And the backing band and the opening act was Michael Simmons and Slewfoot. And we'll get to that a little bit later. But today we'll eventually be interrogating Michael about the art of the liner note. He penned the text for the new Dylan 1970 with George Harrison 3D CD set. Got that handy? There you go. Very cool. He's already done the same for Dylan's bootleg series, volume 10, and other. You could be Carol Merrill.
My whole world lies waiting behind door number 3.
Steve Goodman.
Yeah.
Let's see. He sometimes said for another
demo for me, by the way.
What's that?
Steve Goodman produced a 4-song demo for me in 1979.
Oh, cool.
I ever told you that.
I can't wait for the Michael Simmons bootleg series to release all this stuff. Let's see. As I said, he's written for Mojo. He also wrote the liner notes for this. It's the UK version featuring the real original cast, which is Bob Dylan. The original masters. Michael was asked to write the liner notes for that. He was heavily involved in this set as well. Michael Bloomfield box set. And which is a labor of love, 3 CDs plus Bob Sarle's excellent documentary. And that's how we became friends, actually. He contacted me with the exclusive about Dylan being on that release. He's also penned extensive liner notes for Chris Christopherson's Please Don't Tell Me How the Story Ends, the publishing demos, 1968-72, Moe's Allison tribute, If You're Going to the Big Cities, Kingy Friedman, who we'll be discussing soon. But you're also mainly a singer-songwriter yourself, and you're even written about in Cream magazine and described as the father of country punk, with a term you loathe.
I was 21 when I was dubbed. I was 21 when I was dubbed the father of country punk.
Wow, that's young to be a father.
A young father.
You shared me an excellent recording from the other end, late December 1977. And I actually first saw you a few months earlier in the fall of 77 when I moved to Boston. As I said, I was walking distance from my dorm, and it was the first live thing I'd seen. So it was National Lampoon, and your father was heavily involved in that. What can you tell me about those days?
Where would I start? Well, we were a working band, Michael Simmons and Slewfoot, and my father said, we need a band to go on the road and back up this comedy show consisting of sketches, and would your band be the backup band, and you can open up the show with your own material. And I said, great, because we needed the work. So that was the genesis of that.
And so the band was called Michael Simmons and Slewfoot. And I looked up the term, and it's a hockey reference. Is that what it meant to you, Slewfoot, or is it some other
No,
reference?
I didn't even know it was a hockey reference. It came from a Johnny Horton song called Old Slewfoot that I love. It's on YouTube if you want to hear Johnny Horton's original version. And it's about a bear who was so fast and so wily that they could never catch him. And the chorus went, he ain't never been caught, he ain't never been treated. Some folks say he looks a lot like me. I just like the idea of being smarter than everyone else and being uncatchable.
I so your band had quite the following. It even was written up in Cream magazine.
Several times, yeah.
And you told me also a great story about after that show that you shared with me, the audio, you hung out with the legendary critic Lester Bangs, Cream magazine fame and other things, after the final show of the tour. And I wonder if you wanted to share that story with our viewers.
That show was at the other end in late December 1977, and we were on Dexedrine, these little white truck drivers speed pills, tablets that, if you know the song Willin' by Little Feat, weed,
Yep.
whites, and wine, these were whites. And I'd been up for days, and I used to hang out and play at a bar called the Bells of Hell in the Village where all the rock critics hung out. That's where the Cream magazine connection came in. And I knew Lester very well, and a great guy. And so after the show at the other end, I went over to the Bells to get even more loaded than I already was. And I gave Lester some speed. And when the bar closed at 5 a.m, Lester said, I have to write something for Cream, but you want to come over and hang? And I said, sure. So we went over to his crib on 14th Street, the place where he died, actually. And I just laid on his bed and smoked cigarettes. And he was reviewing an album by the group Suicide, who, if you're familiar with Suicide, were kind of a noise rock, avant-garde noise rock band. And I'd been up for days, and I'm lying on the bed, and Lester is sitting at his desk at his typewriter, and he's listening to the Suicide album, and he's typing away, and this is going on for hours. And finally, Suicide I wanted to commit suicide myself. It was starting to jangle my already jangled nerves. And finally I said, Lester, can you play something other than Suicide? And he was, oh yeah, man, yeah, so sorry, man, yeah, I understand. And he got up and he took Suicide off the record player and he put the Carpenters on the turntable. And I said, thank you, man, thank you. That's the story. Not much of a story, but one little anecdote in the legend that is Lester Bangs.
Yeah, he was quite something.
Great writer.
Oh yeah, I used to read Cream all the time. And,
well, they don't make writers like Lester Bangs anymore because you're not allowed to write like that except on the internet. But you can't write for a magazine like that. Cream allowed their writers incredible freedom, and that doesn't exist anymore. Not in the world of commercial magazines.
Also, he did it so well too that even people who write in his style, Lister was, he was like the first of that type of, or one of the first of that type of music journalism.
Well, he's also incredibly smart and incredibly literate. And there were others. I mean, Nick Tosches, the late great Nick Tosches, Richard Meltzer. Well, they were the three bad boys of rock journalism. But there were other great writers back then. My pal Bob Duncan, my pal Billy Altman. Those are the two guys actually who named me the father of country punk. Bob and Billy. John Morthland, the late John Morthland.
Yeah, I used to read I used to read Cream, I used to read Circus, I used to read Hit Parader, I used to read Crawdaddy like every month, and the occasional Rolling Stone, because I was on every other week. But it just, yeah, that was my education, because there was no internet, and you do that in New York, listening to any WFM and New York Times, and that was it. That's how you tried to figure out had to figure out everything.
Right.
So getting back to National Lampoon a little bit, you did the theme song for a sitcom based on the hit movie Animal House, titled National Lampoon's Delta House, and that was from 1979, and was even a promo 45 on MCA, which is on YouTube. And the lyrics were
promo. It was released. I mean, it didn't sell any copies.
Oh, it did say, oh, okay. I looked it up. I found a promo copy for sale. So it was a commercial release. Cool.
Yeah.
What was on the other side?
A song that I wrote called Nighttime that I performed with the band I had after, Slewfoot, that consisted of members of Asleep at the Wheel, former members of Asleep at the Wheel, Commander Cody, and Roomful of Blues.
Oh, cool.
A big horn band. We had 3 saxophones.
Wow. Is it, for the people watching at home, I've known Michael probably 7 or 8 years or something, and I've only recently found out about all these stories about his musical career and all the things that he's done. I mean, I knew about a few songs, but we'll get to what he's up to now. But he's has quite a history. But anyway, so the lyrics were by Sean Kelly and Tony Hendra, who just died. And Tony Hendra was in Spinal Tap, and he impersonated the legendary John Lennon. Was a tragical history tour, whatever they called it, from National Lampoon. Was it
Magical Misery Tour?
Magical Misery Tour. And the music for the single was written, produced, conducted, and arranged by Jim Steinman of Meatloaf's "Bat Out of Hell" fame. And so that must have been quite an experience. What can you tell us about that?
Well, he produced the basic tracks thinking that he would get Meatloaf to sing it, and I ended up singing it. So it was in a key that wasn't really good for me. So while the record came out okay, I couldn't talk for a week afterwards. It blew my voice out. But it's the one example of me singing quasi metal. A music I have no interest in whatsoever.
Let's talk about Kinky Friedman for a little bit. When I met Kinky outside of Club Passim here in Cambridge a few years back, I introduced myself as a friend of yours, and he said, "Anyone who's a friend of Michael's is a brother of mine." And you ended up in Kinky's years before. You were in a Kinky's band with Larry Campbell. That must have been an insane experience. I mean, Kinky's awesome. I had never seen him before a few years ago, and what was that like?
Oh boy. Well, it was the late 70s, so use your imagination. It was tawdry and despicable, and I'm so ashamed. And Larry Campbell was the band leader and played all the stringed instruments. Howie Wyeth was the drummer.
Oh, he's from Rolling Thunder Review for those, and Desire for those who don't know.
Great guy, great drummer. Also, Corky Lang alternated with Howie. Corky Lang from Mountain. Yeah, a bunch of other people. Sweet Mary Hattersley played fiddle. She had been in Jerry Jeff's band in Austin. And Greasy Wheels, the band Greasy Wheels, if you're familiar with them. Anyway, it was a great experience, a lot of fun. Kinky was always fun. It was always spontaneous, funny. A lot of characters came in and out of that scene, some famous, some not, but all characters.
And you introduced Larry to Teresa Williams, who he eventually married. Is that around that time, or?
No, that was a few years later. It was, I think, 85. I'm not sure. Teresa and I had a mutual friend. She had just come up from Tennessee, and she was in New York to pursue an acting and singing career. and she was invited to perform on a showcase at the Bottom Line for country music. And so through a friend, she contacted me and she said, I don't know any musicians. Can you help me? I said, yeah. So I put together a band with Larry on steel, John Leventhal, who later married Roseanne Cash, on guitar, uh, and a couple of other, rhythm section, and me on acoustic and harmonies. And we did the gig, and one thing led to another, and Larry and Teresa ended up falling in love and getting hitched. The rest is history.
And they're still together making records. Yeah, I saw them a few years back at the Green River Festival. They were awesome.
There's a new documentary out about them, by the way. It's a series, actually. It's hours long. It's really good. It's called, I think it's called It's About the Music. But people should check that out.
You don't know what platform it's on, do you?
I remember.
Yeah, I think I saw something about it, but I didn't know what it was. So it's good. It's a documentary about them. Then it's like a series. Cool.
Yeah, and I was interviewed for it. I told the story of introducing them.
Which now everyone knows. So we'll have to check you out doing it again on that documentary. And you were telling me that you're actually making some demos now with Larry.
Yeah, I have some stuff in the can, and Larry's going to add some guitar and steel and banjo and mandolin and lute and
Zither.
whatever is needed. Larry can play it.
So are these songs that you have recently written, or they've been hanging around for a while? The stuff that
no, they're old songs. I have new songs, but the idea of this project is to get my old songs finished and out. And then I'll proceed with, I have some ideas of where I want to go musically. And this is really, most of this stuff is basic country.
Oh, that reminds me, we didn't really cover, Michael Simmons and Slewfoot, you were called you were called the father of country punk, but you didn't particularly appreciate that description. And so the recording is really the other end recording is a great performance. It's it's rock with a country kind of flavor, but it's not really like much that was going on at the time, was it?
It's not like anything was going on at the time. It's not. It's both hardcore country and hardcore rock and roll, but it's not punk because we could play our instruments. I mean, these guys could play jazz.
Uh-huh.
And the idea was, the first incarnation of Slewfoot was really just a hardcore country band. And then we went through a phase where we were playing Western swing. To this day, I idolize Bob Wills. And then we were rehearsing one day in 1977 during the day at a club called O'Lunny's in New York. Hugh O'Lunny just died, the proprietor. And by the way, and we were upstairs rehearsing. We went down to the bar to have a beer during a break, and they had the radio on, and Springsteen was singing. And I was listening to it. I appreciate Springsteen. I like Springsteen. I'm not the world's biggest fan, but I like what he does. And I liked his energy. And, I was young. I was 22 in 1977. And I remember thinking, what if you fuse the energy of hard rock with pure country? And we proceeded to do that. We designed the set list so that it focused on songs that would accommodate a sound like that. And we did the arrangements accordingly. And that's when we were playing the Bells of Hell in the Village. That's when the rock critics started saying, that's country punk. I mean, we really weren't punk. There wasn't anything punk about us, except my antics on stage, like me leaping off the stage and running through the audience and grabbing drinks off of people's tables. And it was kind of.
Well, it was the 70s.
It was fun, man. I gotta tell you.
You were on Sirius XM a few years back with Kinky. I think was it for the Lone Star celebration?
It was for the
And,
Lone Star reunion. Yeah.
yeah, and so you appeared in New York. Now, what was that like? Was it you were all in the same band at that time too? We were all on stage together, or how would that? What was that? What
No,
was the Lone Star celebration
it
exactly?
was me, Kinky, Commander Cody, Rob Stoner, a variety of people who had played the Lone Star in the 70s. I played with Larry Campbell and Tony Garnier, and who I'd played with in the 70s.
Right.
In fact, when Tony first moved from Austin to New York, he stayed with me, he and his girlfriend, and a guy named Danny McDermott on drums, and that's who I played with that night at the Lone Star reunion. It was just it was a lot of fun. It's just a chance for a bunch of old friends to get together and play music and hang out.
Uh, so Kinky asked you to write the liner notes for his first album in I don't know how many years, which was The Loneliest Man I Ever Met. And Bob Dylan was a fan of Kinky's. He had him on the second Rolling Thunder Review tour. Nelson Mandela was an admirer of Kinky's, especially the song Ride 'em Jew Boy, which he would listen to in jail. So let's talk about liner notes for a little bit. And you're also, and aside from the liner notes for that, you're also doing his bio for his website, which is being revamped. So take me, if you can, take me through the process of you played your own singer songwriter of your own career. You played with Kinky and Kinky's band, and now you're writing. You wrote the liner notes for this album. So so what do you feel that the experience of being a singer songwriter and a performer brings to the art of writing liner notes?
Well, I don't consider myself, people have called me a rock critic. First of all, I'm not a critic. I really don't like to criticize. I'm I'm a music journalist, for want of a better term, but what I really am is a musician who happens to write about music. So I write about music from the viewpoint. I try to write about music from the viewpoint of a musician. I generally steer away from gossip and dope tales and lurid sex orgies. And I mean, not personally, I engage in those daily if I can, not since the pandemic, of course, but pre-pandemic and hopefully post-pandemic, I will be back engaging in drugs and sex. But what I bring to to my writing, I think, is a musician's perspective, hopefully.
Um, so one of the things that when I was reviewing various things that you've written over the years, and one of the things that I like the best about it is you insert your personal connection to the music. You did it when you're talking about how you talked your way into seeing Chris Christopherson when you were 15 or something, when he was opening for Ian and Sylvia in I think 1970. No one really knew who he was. Or how a friend turned you on to Michael Bloomfield. You remember the exact moment when that happened, or how you got a Bring It All Back Home, a songbook before you heard the album. The context is important for understanding music and history and all sorts of things. And I think that's one of the things that I really like about your writing is you were there, and it was so important to you when you were young. You can pinpoint things that were unique and that you bring to your stories or your writing about these artists who are iconic. And you were a kid at home, and your friend tells you about this, or however it happens. It's not particularly a question, but I just think it's a great thing to bring that fan aspect without being a fanboy, so to speak, but just being so into the music when you were young, and decades later, you get to write about it and share it. So
well, it's about passion. Music has been my lifelong passion from my earliest memories on. And then, of course, when the Beatles and Dylan hit, my road was set. Ironically, there are certain publications that don't like it when I write in first person, but so usually my first person stuff is either in columns that I've written or in liner notes where I have the freedom to bring memories up and bring context, my personal context up. What I'm trying to convey is why I love this music. And it's not just, it's why I love it, but it's why everybody loves it. I mean, music is, I've always thought music is the superior language. If people were forced to talk if people were forced to sing to each other as opposed to talking, I think war would end. I don't think you can kill somebody who's singing to you. And it's always it's something I've thought about often, that we should make everyone sing to each other. The problem is a lot of people sing out of key, but and drive other people crazy.
Which would start a war right there.
Exactly. But I don't know if you'd kill the other person. You might yell at them, but you wouldn't kill them. And so what that's about is just, writing in the first person is just bringing one's personal passion to the subject.
And it makes it more relatable too, because everyone has their own stories. Exactly. And they might not have seen Chris Christopherson in 1970, but they might have seen some other person in some other show, and that changed their life in a different way.
Well, everybody has their own, musical passions and stories and things that change their lives. Stuff's important.
And speaking of important, we have the Bob Dylan 1970 album, and you once again, it was your job to write the liner notes. When we spoke previously, you told me that you loved the album immediately.
Self-portrait.
What's that? Self-portrait, right? But right. That this is the 19. Just everyone has watched this probably already knows, but this is the 1970 recordings that have not been released on previous albums or compilations. It originally came out last year as a copyright protection thing. They've done this numerous times in 62, for the 50th anniversary of 62, 63, 64. They released in Europe maybe 100 or 200 copies of whatever they had in the vaults. And then from 65 to now, everything else has been pretty much covered on the bootleg series, except for, again, in late 69 and in 1970, again, they released these limited edition things, compilations of outtakes. And normally, as I said, there's a couple hundred released. And if they are not released, they go into the public domain. In Europe, they have different copyright laws. But this one, I guess, had such a high demand for a variety of reasons. One of them is probably that George Harrison's on it. And probably there's always a high demand, actually. But so they finally decided to share it again, release it to the public. They added artwork and they added Michael's excellent liner notes. But it's really funny because one of the things I want to discuss with you is how the reputation of the album changed. It was before my time, so I only heard that it was a terrible album. When I bought it, I didn't think it was terrible, but I didn't buy it till the 80s, I don't think, because of its reputation. In Rolling Stone, obviously the famous quote started as "What is this shit?" And you wrote about the album, not in Mojo, probably around 2013 or so. And then you were given the honor of writing one of the set of liner notes for another self-portrait bootleg series, volume 10 in 2013. And just for starters, did your writing about Mojo have any? Do you know if that had anything to do with why you were chosen to be one of the writers, one of the liner note writers of the Bootleg series?
I think you're referring to the piece I wrote about Dylan in 1970,
About
from Joe,
right.
which was, I think, 2010.
Oh, was that much earlier? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't remember off the top of my head, but
Mm.
yeah, I think that had something to do with them hiring me to write about self-portrait, since it covered that period. But I had a friend named Barry Parker in the 60s who loved, was the only New York Jew, hippie Jew, teenage hippie Jew, who loved Nashville country music. And he hipped me to that stuff. And I fell in love with it. I had no problem with it. Most rock snobs did have a problem with it. And anyway, when Self Portrait came out with background singers and strings and production and everything, it wasn't foreign to me. I was familiar with that sound, and I liked that sound. I loved that sound. And I love Self Portrait. I loved it from the minute I heard it. But I think another Self Portrait is even better. The bootleg series that covers that period. And I think this stuff that on the new collection, 1970, is great.
I agree with you on all three counts. Now, more than any other, in my not so humble opinion, more than any other bootleg series, the Another Self-Portrait set changed the way people thought about the album. As I said, it had this negative connotation. It had its fans. I mean, it was a top 10 album. A lot of people liked it, but the reputation, especially that Rolling Stone review, really and plus it just seemed exactly the opposite of what they thought Bob Dylan stood for, as if anyone ever really understands any of that stuff or tries to pigeonhole him in any way. But it was kind of like the Rodney Dangerfield of albums, it got no respect. So when it came, so they were before that, another Self-Portrait. On Greatest Hits Volume 2, they added the live version of Mighty Quinn. There was a 1973 Revenge album, which had the outtakes. That album Masterpieces, which came out in I think Australia and Japan, had a couple of Isle of Wight cuts. Bootleg series Volume 1 to 3, I think it only had If Not For You was the only thing they had. It's something that did not really, they didn't feel really it had any, they didn't want to add it to these compilations. It didn't, whoever was putting it together felt it wasn't his best work, I guess. And then but then when Another Self-Portrait came out, that was a revelation. And I was actually listening to it again this morning. I got about a third of the way through again. And it's brilliant stuff. And there's so many things to say about it. But one of it is that you imagine if they just took like 12 of the old songs on that and they put that out in Self-Portrait, it would have had a whole different trajectory of Dylan's career, probably. What you call your liner notes is "This Is What This Shit Is," which was an awesome title, and it was obviously a reference to Karl Marx's "What Is This Shit" opening quote from Rolling Stones we talked about. And did you have any? I mean, sometimes a great title doesn't sit well with us. Doesn't mean that the people in charge are going to appreciate it. Do you have any apprehension suggesting that as a title?
For years when I was writing, I wrote whatever I wanted, and then I started writing for magazines that told me what they allowed and what they didn't allow, and my writing got narrower and narrower, and I started to worry that people would be offended by things, which I had never worried about before. So I came up with this title for the liner notes, "This Is What This Shit Is." And I said to the powers that be, this was the title I came up with. I hope you're okay with it. And they said, no, we love it. And so there it is.
Do you have this book?
Yeah. What is it?
It's Paul Cable, the guy's name, and it's called Bob Dylan, His Unreleased Recordings. It seems like he wrote it in 78 and it came out in 80. And he's another, I just wanted to, again, for people who are too young to really understand how reviled the album was. He writes about the self-portrait outtakes. Undoubtedly, there are more self-portrait outtakes than the two here. Just lists a couple that he knew about at the time, but they have not surfaced, or at least some of them have surfaced, but are now less outtakes than genuine tracks on that Dylan album from '73. Just the same, there is still probably a good few left in Columbia's vault. I hate to lend my voice to all the bitching that has gone on about self-portrait, but if these versions of Ring of Fire and Folsom Prison Blues are anything to go by, I'm happy for the remaining outtakes to stay where they are. That's the reputation of the album. That, you know, you don't really hear that about any other Dylan album. And even now, everyone wants everything released, and it seems like that's the way things are going with the copyright laws. And
look, you know, Howard, the point is, the bottom line is, I like what I like, and I really don't care what anybody else thinks. So, you know, the thing about Dylan is that he constantly often leaves his best stuff off of any given album. You know, he left Blind Willie McTell off of Infidels most famously. In fact, I just wrote about that for Mojo.
You know, by the way, is that out yet? That article? You know,
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I never know.
So he leaves the best stuff off often.
And, you know, when I first heard Another Self-Portrait, and I heard Pretty Sorrow and, you know, a bunch of the songs that were left off Self-Portrait, I went, oh my God, that stuff is even better than I thought it was. Because Another Self-Portrait is arguably better than Self-Portrait. And I love Self-Portrait.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's arguably. It's just, I mean, it's just him and Bromberg and Al Cooper just playing those songs, and it's just so loose and you know, it's Bob Dylan relaxing and having fun. And I think a lot of people don't like it when Bob Dylan's having fun. They like him when he's miserable. And you know, he's allowed to have fun, I think, every once in a while.
Allowed to do whatever the hell he wants.
He's Bob Dylan.
Even if he was, you know, Joe Schmo. You know, I don't really listen to critics, man. I don't really care what other people think. I like what I like. Yeah. You know, I was once talking to Al Cooper, and I said, we were talking about what kind of music we like. And it boiled down to, we like what we like. You know, there's stuff that would surprise you. I think I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but in 1973, when I was 18, you know, I'm surrounded by, you know, I had a roommate for my 1 year in college. I had a roommate who all he listened to was Hound Dog Taylor and John Coltrane. And I fell in love with this single by Donnie and Marie Osmond called I'm Leaving It All Up to You, which was a cover of an old, I think 50s song. And I just loved the song. I didn't care that it was Donnie and Marie. And I would play this record over and over again. And poor Frank, my roommate, who was also a musician, really fine tenor sax and harmonica player, it would drive him nuts. He hated the idea of Donnie and Marie. It wasn't even so much the music. It was ideologically incorrect to listen to Donnie and Marie in 1973 and to like them. I just like this one song. I mean, I hate Madonna, but there's one song that she does that I really like. Live to Tell. Do you know that's Madonna's song? It was in a movie with Sean Penn. I don't remember the name of it, with Chris Walken and Sean Penn. Let me get comfortable. Ow, ow, ow. I have a dislocated hip, so.
Well, we should compare elements later.
If we have. Where was I?
So you like what you like. You like Madonna.
I like what I like. You know, Dylan in Chronicles, Dylan goes into the fact that he loved the Kingston Trio, and that they were considered by folky purists to be impure. And Dylan didn't care. He dug them. I dig them too. In fact, John Stewart, the late John Stewart, who was in King's Trio, was a close friend of mine. But yeah, I love the Kingston Trio. I like what I like. That Madonna song, "Live to Tell." Check it out if you don't know it. It's a great song.
Yeah, I mean, I've Archie Sugar Sugar on my playlist.
I always loved Sugar Sugar. I always thought Joe Cocker should do Sugar Sugar.
When 1969 is when I moved from the Beatles and the Monkees and got a transistor radio, and all that's like my favorite year. It might not be the coolest year, but it's got everything from Dizzy by Tommy Rowe to Crimson and Clover to the Temptations and Sly and the Family Stone and Johnny Cash and just everything. I would just buy the $1 a week allowance and I'd buy 45s.
Yeah, I mean, those of us who were raised on Top 40 radio lived and died by the song. The song was God, and a great song with a great hook, a great melody, and good lyrics, even if they were simple, was what ruled in those days. And first of all, people don't know how to write melodies anymore. I heard my friend Peter Stanfield talks about this. He just released an album of 100 songs from the last 100 years, one song from each year of the last, or the 20th century, not the last, but right, from 1900 to 2000 or something like that. And he said, young people today do not worship melody the way we did. They don't know how to write hooks, and they don't care about melody. And my theory has always been, I could be completely wrong about this, but with the advent of punk and hip hop, rhythm became more important than melody. Whereas we were not only raised on the Beatles and Bob Dylan, all of whom knew how to write great melodies, but we were raised on our parents' music, and that consisted of Cole Porter and Rodgers and Hart, Rodgers and Hammerstein, Jerome Kern, that kind of stuff. And that's classic melody writing. Even, 19th century stuff. Stephen Foster wrote incredible melodies. There's an art to it. There's an art to it, and there's a craft to it as well. And it's kind of lost in some ways. Occasionally something will pop up. I mean, it's not completely missing, but melody is not as respected as it once was.
And also in those days, it wasn't as segregated too. You'd listen to your radio, and all these different music would all be mixed one after another. It'd be Charlie Rich, and then be the Rolling Stones, Hungry Young Women, or whatever. Just like it was all one after another, and I didn't even think like. It wasn't until I was older. It's like, I guess Glenn Campbell is country. I never thought about it. He's just a guy who had I bought his, Try a Little Kindness single because I liked it. I didn't really think about it too much. And
which single? Sorry.
Try a Little Kindness.
Oh yeah.
So
I love Wichita Lineman is a great. Well, Jimmy Webb is a great song.
Yeah.
But Wichita Lineman, or By the Time I Get to Phoenix, still breaks my heart, man. What songs those are, and what performances by Glenn Campbell, who was also one of the greatest guitar players who ever walked the planet. But again, we weren't supposed to like Glenn Campbell at a certain point because, he didn't look like Frank Zappa or something. I don't know. I liked who I liked.
That's right. And that's and that comes across in your writing, because what you write about, the passion and all that shows up in it when you do it. So let's see. I lost my place here. Okay, so what I do is I'm reading this off my phone for those watching at home.
I thought you printed it up.
My printer wasn't working. I tried a couple of times and I don't know where it went.
Technology grand.
So as I said, I just wanted to actually share this story. Speaking of my first exposure to some of this music from that ended up on this 1970 album. I used to have this friend who was one of the biggest collector guy I knew personally, in terms of going to his house and just like, videotapes up to the wall. He just would tape everything and collect everything. Like he had Levon on the Hawks 45s. I mean, this guy just had everything. And So one day he gave me a cassette. It said Nashville Skyline Sessions, February '69, and it had a list of songs starting with "Song to Woody." And there's no internet at the time, so didn't know what it was. And he just made it for me because he knew I like Bob Dylan. And just listening to it, and it's like, first of all, what an odd selection of songs. It was awesome, but it was puzzling. It was baffling what it was. And then, at the end of Yesterday, you could hear George Harrison say, you should put some cellos on it now, or something after the song Yesterday. And that's how you would find out. You'd be so intensely listening to it and trying to figure it out. And it's like the reason he's doing Yesterday and what we thought was to do Ron Ron, even though that's not the real title, and all these weird covers or songs or oldies, his own oldies, is because George is probably there in between. Either George is requesting it. I know how much you like trying to suppose what everyone's thinking, but
yeah, that's fun. I mean, I think you're right. Well, also they do two Carl Perkins songs, and we know that George idolized Carl Perkins.
And when
he even played in a tribute to Carl Perkins that was on HBO years ago.
Yeah, the 1985 with Ringo and Clapton and some Stray Cats and stuff. Yeah, and Dave Edmunds. And this and even if you had the bootleg, illegally somehow came across these recordings, you still get It Ain't Me, Babe, and some other stuff that you hadn't heard before in this new collection. And it's also fun. I'm as a fan listening, and he's doing "Honey, Just Allow Me One More Chance," which is it's on that college album that came out. I can't remember where it was, a couple of years ago, but
wasn't it on his first Columbia album?
It's on the second one, but also he did it in a live out, but he hasn't done it, whatever. It's one of the things George probably did. And at one point he just says "chicken sneeze." And it's like, and then I heard of Woody Guthrie's "We Shall Be Free," and he says "chicken sneeze." So you're just wondering how his mind works, because he's doing a song to Woody, and he probably had Woody on, just thinking about Woody Guthrie, and he just couldn't think of the words, so he just added a Woody Guthrie thing that, here we are 50 years later talking about it. And of course, they were the two of them, Bob and George, if I can call them by their first names. They were the great Mutual Admiration Society, and it led to the concert of Bangladesh, the Traveling Wilburys, and indirectly the dissolution of the Beatles, because George felt much more respected being with Dylan and having a good time with Dylan and the band in Woodstock or whatever than going back to Twickenham and everyone arguing all the time. As you know, like George would just be quoting Dylan like it was scripture. He was such an admirer, and there's just the whole. I mean, you can all do a whole podcast just on their interactions, but I just want to know what, if you remember how you first came in contact with those recordings. I assume these aren't the first time you've heard these recordings, the George Harrison stuff, the George and Bob 1970 stuff.
Bootlegs.
Yeah. And but I mean, it's Bob having fun. It's just them relaxing, and again, it's when I think about that guy who wrote that book, and it's like, well, when you see or listen to, I should say, was it Bob Dylan and Forest Hills doing Desolation Row, and people are laughing. Bob Dylan was funny. Bob Dylan was hilarious. Or as Jack Nicholson said, he was a riot. And by the time he went electric and had the accident, it's like it's sacred. And I think that's part of the thing that led to the negative feeling about Self-Portrait, where it was just again, it's him having fun and him relaxing. He wasn't being the spokesman for the generation, which he never wanted to be. I would imagine you agree that it's like the pressure of being Bob Dylan, it's got to be enormous. And in some ways, it's one way he took its toll on him by making these recordings.
Well, what do you mean that he was having fun in the studio as a release of sorts?
Yeah, because he's like, well, I'm not going to be singing protest songs.
I mean, it's not like he stopped singing protest songs. People put Dylan in boxes that he was never in. Yeah, he stopped writing overtly topical songs. For the most part, there are many exceptions. George Jackson, Hurricane, etc. But I mean, I'm hardly the first person to say this, but people try to. I don't know. People need to say things about Dylan. I only say something about Dylan if I have something to say that's more than just an opinion or a half-assed perspective, or if somebody's paying me, I'll think of something to say about Bob Dylan.
Exactly. And
plus, I've written 3-liners for Dylan. That's just an honor.
I know. And
I've had no greater honor as a writer than to do those 3-liners. That and the Bloomfield and Christopherson and Kinky and whoever. There have been others too.
Now, do you care that Dylan sold this publishing at all?
No.
I know there's 100 articles. I don't think I finished one of them.
I have an opinion about that. I mean, why? I don't mean me, but why would anyone have an opinion?
Well, I'm not getting the money. You're not getting the money.
But I mean, why? I notice people have these days. Well, I guess maybe it's always been true, but particularly these days, people have opinions about everything. I don't have an opinion about a lot of things. I mean, and I'm an incredibly opinionated person, and yet I'm not as opinionated as half the public. You read the internet, and you see these people who, I think, and I think, and I think, and it's like, why? Why do I care what you think? Who are you anyway? Your name is Pussyfoot 49 or something. I don't know. The internet is the height of absurdity, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah. And so do you have any, finishing up, do you have any particular plans to celebrate Bob Dylan's 80th birthday?
No.
All right. Well,
long answer, no.
Short answer. Well, let's wish Bob a happy birthday. It's coming up in a couple of months, I guess. And thank you, Michael. This has been fun as always.
Thank you.
We're looking forward to when COVID is over. I guess hopefully we'll be able to get a new release with you with the help of Larry Campbell.
Yeah, you'll be hearing Michael Simmons music, hopefully.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, and I will. I have no great closing quote, so I'll just say fare thee well.
Where'd you get that?
From the same thing I got the beginning of. And Bob, and Bob doesn't even own that anymore, so hopefully I won't get in trouble.
So you got it from Universal, in other words.
That's right. Who also owns your work, right? Well,
they own that one single. Yeah. I'm sure they don't remember.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, Harold.